This screencast is to support this lesson on functional language of offers on the topic of driving, and it's from Straightforward Intermediate Students' Book by P. Kerr, Kerr, and C. Jones, published by Macmillan. It starts off with some speaking and vocabulary on compound nouns related to driving. Then there's a listening exercise, and then it moves on to the functional language of offers with some practice tasks. So let's have a look at the individual tasks in more detail. So the book starts with some speaking and vocabulary, and the initial discussion task for the lead-in is who are better drivers, men or women, why? But frankly, this seems a bit sexist and outdated. So I wouldn't ask that question. I would think of another one or two discussion questions that you could ask. Perhaps, do you drive? When did you learn? Or how long have you been driving? Do you plan to learn to drive? Etc. So once they've had a discussion briefly about driving and been introduced to the topic, they can move on to exercise 2. Complete the compound nouns in the phrases 1 to 8 with a word from the box. So you've got 8 words in the box, 8 sentences which have a gap, and they need to put one of the words in the gap. So for example, driving a car 20 kilometers per hour over the speed limit. So elicit number 1 together and then allow them to complete the rest, either in pairs, small groups, or individually, and then peer check before you do feedback. Think of any that you might need to concept check during the feedback. Are there any which you think you might need to check the meaning of in more depth? And also any that you think you might want to drill. Then they can do the discussion exercises in 3 and 4. Choose the 3 most serious actions from exercise 2. What should the punishment for these actions be? And what annoys you most about other drivers? And if they do drive, what kind of driver are you? Next, they're going to do some listening practice. So it says, number 1, look at the photos. So they've got 2 photos here. What do you think is happening in each photo? So they predict what's happening, and they say whether they've ever been in a similar situation themselves. Then, number 2, before they listen, they read the summaries of 2 dialogues. Then they listen to the dialogues and correct the 2 mistakes in each of the summaries. So dialogue 1 is where the woman's car is broken down, and dialogue 2, a driver is trying to find the centre of a town. So there are some mistakes in each of the summaries, and the students need to listen to the 2 dialogues and identify the 2 mistakes in each one. Before they listen, do check to see if there's any blocking vocabulary that you will need to pre-teach in the audio. So have a look at the audio script in the teacher's notes and see if there are any difficult words in there that are going to stop them being able to answer this question correctly. So the students listen and then peer check. Monitor this carefully to see if they've got the answers and if they need to perhaps listen again. And then if they do need to listen again, play it through again, allow them to peer check a second time and get some feedback, making sure that they can see the answers. Before they listen again to do the next listening task, they need to look at these 6 sentences in exercise 3 and decide on the correct verb to complete the conversational expressions. So number 1, I'll give you a hand or I'll pass you a hand, meaning I'll help you. So elicit the right answer for that one. I'll give you a hand. And then allow them to do the rest. So they need to choose the correct verb. And then they listen to the same dialogues as before, where all of these expressions appear, and they can check their answers to see if they were correct. And allow them to peer check after they've checked their answers to say what, so they can discuss together whether they got their answers right or wrong, and make sure that they've got the correct answers visible to them on a slide too. If there's any further checking that needs doing of meaning or pronunciation, do it here in feedback. So next we're going to examine the functional language of offers that comes out of that audio, the language we use when we're offering to do something. So we treat this like grammar, we treat it like a chunk of language, a set phrase that we use, okay? So the first thing the students need to do is look at the words or parts of words in the box and put the correct one in the gap. So I check it for you, okay? It could be can I, or it could be shall I, all right? So they need to look through the other sentences and see if that eliminates any of those two as a possibility in number one. And then you want to get them to check together if they haven't done the activity together and get some feedback. Make sure they've got the correct answers. And then what would be really useful is to look at the form. So what happens here in terms of form? So as I said previously, we treat this language, this functional language, as a set phrase. So for example, can I, I'll, let me, do you want me to, would you like me to, and can I, So if we've got all of those phrases, what are they all followed by? And this is what the students need to work out. So you could put all those phrases in a column, put plus, and ask the students what they're all followed by. So check, come, explain, have, repeat, and do. They're all the infinitive without to, otherwise called the bare infinitive or the base verb. Okay, so they learn the first part like a chunk of language, and then they need to know that they're all followed by the base verb. And then we can do some drilling. So can I check it for you? Can I? Can I? Can I? Think about any weak forms, any contractions. I'll come with you if you like. Think about sentence stress. Let me explain. Okay, think about intonation. Do you want me to have a look? Okay, all of these things really important with functional language because it's as much about how we say it as what we're actually saying. Make sure initially in the meaning, when you're checking meaning, that you do elicit that these are offers. So if I'm offering to do something, do I want to help you? Yes. Okay. So that would come in the meaning part when you're doing the feedback to the initial gap fill, because we always check meaning first, don't we? So make sure they understand what an offer is, and then you can go into the form with the verbs, and then you can do some drilling. An important part of any functional language, like offers, are the responses. So rather than getting the students to go through the audio scripts of the dialogues they've heard, which can be quite laborious and time consuming and becomes a whole reading task in itself, I would just try and elicit some responses from the students. What could you say if somebody says, can I do anything for you? What could you say? You could say, yes, please. You could say, that's very kind of you. You could say any of these, in fact. So any of these responses would be suitable for any of these offers. But it depends, obviously, whether you want to accept the offer or not. So try and elicit some examples. You could present these 6 examples of responses as a kind of gapped word exercise where they have some letters missing from the words and they have to try and work out what goes in them. You could start off by eliciting ways to accept an offer and then eliciting ways to decline an offer politely. Now it's time for some controlled practice. So exercise 3 gives a series of situations, and the students need to think of as many different ways as possible to offer to help in these situations. So as always, let's do an example together. So number 1, a friend's car is broken down. It will probably take a week to repair. So what can you do to offer to help your friend? Now, it's really important that the students use the target language, so the offers they've been working on. So make sure that some ideas are visible to them while they're looking at these situations. So they don't just have to remember all the language of offers, that they can actually see some examples or have at least some prompts to help them. So rather than giving them the full sentences, because that would make it too easy, I would give them these words and parts of words in the yellow box along with the control practice task, and I'd get them to try and come up with some offers using these words. So for example, number 1, I could elicit some sentences like, would you like me to give you a lift anywhere? Or I can lend you my car if you like. Can I take you anywhere? Etc. So I would put them into groups and get them to come up with as many different offers as possible for each of the situations given in the practice task. Monitor this carefully, bring them back as a group and elicit some feedback and see how many different offers the students can come up with. And this is a nice opportunity to ask more concept checking questions if they're not quite using it in the right way, or if they've got the form wrong, you can check the form again, or any pronunciation issues that come up can be corrected at this stage as well. And then for the freer practice, they can do number 4, work in pairs and choose 3 of the situations from exercise 3 and act out a dialogue for each situation. So they could work together and create some mini dialogues. So with an offer, which includes an offer and a response. It also needs to include other information. For example, if they choose number 5, a friend is organising a huge party for 100 people. The dialogue might be something like, oh, I hear you're organising a huge party for your birthday. Would you like me to help you prepare any food for it? And then the other person might say, oh, that's very kind of you. I'd like that if you wouldn't mind. Okay, no problem at all. What shall we make? Let's make some cakes and sandwiches. Great. There's your mini dialogue. So monitor while they're creating their dialogues and get them all back together. They can do some in front of each other if they like, and then do some post-fluency correction